feel like today's Friday.
What?
I feel like today's Friday.
Like a what?
I feel like today is Friday.
Yeah.
Can't you hear me through the thing?
Yeah. Well, I keep it turned down so they don't echo.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Think Sacred podcast. My name is Zach. I'm here with my father, Phil. And if you're new to the podcast, what we try to do is we try to just have our discussions kind of like we do in real life, but I try to take up a more worldly, philosophical type view, whereas Dad tries to take up a more theological, biblical type view. So that way, I can pose some tough questions and then he can answer them appropriately. Hopefully that makes sense. It's usually a free-form discussion. We generally just have a topic that we're just going to talk about, and then we just kind of go from there and just see what happens. So we actually had... Oh, did you watch the last episode, and did you have any notes or anything like that?
I did, and I don't have any notes, actually, which is surprising.
Yeah, the last one was pretty good, but I guess there's quite a few comments, actually. So our first comment from Argemps, they said, read the Screw Tape Letters. They're actually commenting on our episode 2 video, the one that's, where we asked, is society evil? And we actually touched on that on the last one, and we'll probably touch on it a lot on this episode. Oh yeah, for everybody, what we're going to talk about today after we're done with the comments here, we're going to talk about, I guess, the apocalypse, revelations, that kind of stuff, and just kind of see what we think about that kind of. I mean, it's an interesting topic. It always seems in style. But anyways, the comment says, read the Screw Tape Letters. That'll give you insight into how the devil works. That's an interesting comment. Do you have any? You want to say anything about that?
It's a book by C.S. Lewis, and my recollection of it, it's saying, or it's one of the higher demons writing to a lower demon to how to, I guess, fool certain person in humanity. That's my vague recollection from reading it many years ago.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because of the subtleties that that higher demon tried to pose. You know what I mean, as to how to do it. What am I correct as to the topic?
Yeah,
of that?
you're right.
Okay.
The devil, or the minor devil, is trying to keep a kid from becoming a Christian or something like that, something along those lines. We've actually. So I've read the Screw Tape Letters. I've read Mere Christianity. I've read Problem with Pain. Do you still have Problem with Pain, or do you? I know you have Mere Christianity.
I do. I have both. Yeah.
Yeah, you have both of them. So we're big fans of C.S. Lewis. I've read a couple of his essays. I've also listened to a lot of his letters audioly on YouTube, like specifically the ones where he's writing to J.R.R. Tolkien, and also it just ones like that. Yeah. So we're big fans of C.S. Lewis. I actually really like. I don't know. Have you ever heard his?
Did we answer the question? No, the question was you. Oh,
it wasn't a question.
Oh, okay.
It was a comment of just read the Screw Tape Letters.
Okay, we agree.
Yeah.
God, I didn't want to miss that. So
yeah, but C.S. Lewis had a radio show during World War II, and they have it like posted online, and it's pretty fascinating to listen to. It's
that was where Mere Christianity came from. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, like from his rummagings on that or something. Or
yeah, basically it was more excerpts from that, so to speak, or it was basically formed out of his him being on the radio and being able to, so to speak, evangelize, you know what I mean? And again, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
When you're talking about evangelism, that was more evangelism toward people who didn't really have a basis in a Christian worldview, so to speak. And so I think you could argue he had to start from a different place and just really kind of more or less prove the existence of God, prove the existence of evil, than go into the dualism, so to speak, of God and evil, in other religions, and then how do you settle into Christianity from there, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's mere Christianity. You're right. It was from those radio broadcasts.
That's interesting because we also touched on that in previous episodes about starting from different points, to talk about. My only one thing I would say to RGemps about this comment, the screw tape letters is obviously it's not biblical. It's not part of the Bible, and so there is a part of it you should probably take. It's kind of like Dante's Inferno, right? Dante's Inferno is great.
Okay.
And I mean it's an absolutely incredible book, but some people think that it's real, and it's not. It's not part of the biblical canon. This 9 layers of hell thing that came up in that in that book is it's nowhere in the Bible, and there's nothing in the Bible that even alludes to it being in that manner, and a lot of people believe it. So it's one of those things you kind of it's like the Peter thing. It's like the Peter being hung upside down. It's just not in the Bible. It's just not. We don't have any proof of it. It's just not. It's its own thing.
Okay.
Hope that made sense.
No, but I would agree. Those are good reads, though. You know what I mean? Screw tape letters and other C.S. Lewis books.
So then I've got 2 commenters on one of our shorts, and it's one where I'm actually talking about how we identify things. Yeah, I was trying to go a little deep there, and you asked if that's how philosophers go crazy. I have 2 comments on that, and one of them is actually talking about the analogy of the cave, Plato's cave, right? So this is by Mike Toole, EK90 or EK9S. You can't see how the shadows, I think is what they meant to say. You can't see how the shadows are cast if you're chained to the cave floor. You've got to get up and look around at what's in the cave. When did you people start thinking you're supposed to leave the cave? My answer to you, Mike, is so I mean, we talked about this in philosophy, Plato's cave. This is where we talked the most about it. So let me think. When was my last philosophy class? It was probably in 2014, 2013, 2014. I mean, it was like a week-long discussion on Plato's cave. We went pretty deep into it, and I think if you just type in Plato's cave right now and you click on images on Google, the common depiction is that there's a hole going out of the cave. I mean, I can see the picture in my mind. I've seen it many times. There's a picture of the cave, the whole analogy, the wall, the fire, the shadows on the wall, but then there's a hole at the back of the cave, and then there's like an arrow pointing up in other worlds. Yeah. So, yeah, that's that one. The other comment on that same video is from Philosopher's Volley 4191. He says we have access to them, but many philosophers become obsessed, and that by definition tears you from what you're meant to observe. There's a state of being required to being as successful as a philosopher. So yeah, that's I get what you're saying. You're specifically referring to that state of mind that I was talking about. That Dad was asking, is that what drives you crazy, right? Or that's what drives philosophers crazy? And the truth of it is, the best philosophers actually do go crazy. The best ones, like Nietzsche, who basically after he left his job in Boston, he basically spent the next 10 years purposely living in isolation. There's other philosophers that lock themselves in cabins for years, right? And that's where they write all their stuff. And it's basically in their isolation that they end up writing things. Nietzsche writes his Red Book then. I think he also writes his Black Book then, too. So his Black and his Red Book are both written in isolation. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I totally agree with you. There's a state of mind, because you can't live like that, right? To live in that state of mind all the time, you just go crazy. And trust me, I've tried. No, I'm being facetious on that. I'm joking, but yeah, when you do purposely try to live in that philosophical state, it is very difficult. Okay, on the next one, another comment. This is from the short "Is Your Reality Fake?" where I'm just talking about, you can't see, or you can't. We kind of were talking about you can't prove anything. You can't know everything. Yeah.
I think it's what said, yeah.
Another comment by Mike Tool EK9S. He says, "This is what 13-year-olds talk about." I'm sure it is. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be. I don't want to be mean or rude or anything like that. But I mean, look, my kid. He's in elementary school, in the early elementary school, and they're learning about David and Goliath. We still talk about David and Goliath. Some of these things are, like, you think they're simple because we learned them when we were really, really young, but they hold deeper truths, and they definitely, it's always a good reminder to go back and to re-observe the things. Like, you always have to go back and just look at 1 + 1. You know what I mean? You have to go back to basics. It's what scientists say too. Scientists say when you start doing science, especially if you're doing like hard sciences, you always go back to basics, and then you build up from those basics again. Same thing with the Bible. You go back to when you're talking theology, Phil, like, that's where we start. We start back at the basics of what we believe, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I mean, I'm not going to pretend to talk about philosophy or explain philosophy. So I'm just letting you answer. It was something that you actually, you were the one talking for the most part. I just had some questions because I'm more curious. But
yeah,
but I would agree. Anything. I'm sorry. Pretty much anything. You go back to the basics. When it comes to even when you're doing things, you go back to the basics. When it comes to math, you go back to the basics. When it comes to theology, yeah, I mean, you go back. The best ones are the ones that have their foundation in the basics, and they can explain very high level stuff to other people who are wannabe theologians, and they can explain very base things to new Christians.
Okay. So this is another comment from Linkolus. This one's kind of a mean one. Let's see. You're still out here lying about what faith is. We don't have, quote, faith. We have reasonable expectations based on previous experiences. I have reasonable expectations a chair won't break, or my wife loves me. Faith is what you use when you believe something without evidence, or even in contrast to evidence, or even in contrast to evidence to the contrary.
Wait, what? I'm sorry. This was on what video?
On this video is Your Reality Fake. One of the things that we ended up saying was even atheists have to take things on faith because you can't prove this. You're saying here to address the comment. You're saying contrast to the evidence to the contrary. That's a little funky there, but when you believe something without evidence, yes, you don't have any evidence, Mr. Linkolus. You don't have any evidence that yesterday existed. You can't prove it to me. There's no way you can prove it to me. There's nothing that you can present forward to me that would be proof, right? You say reasonable expectations. Well, we have the same level. That's what we have. We have a reasonable expectation, and we don't have any contrasting evidence. There's nothing that goes against us, against what we're saying when we talk about faith. So I would argue what you're saying, we don't have faith. What you're saying, the atheists, or you specifically, don't have faith. I'm saying you need to re-examine what the definition of faith is. Our definition of faith has nothing to do with contrasting evidence because we don't have any contrasting evidence. And your version of faith is lacking the evidence of yesterday and tomorrow. You say reasonable expectation. Reasonable expectation is not evidence. Reasonable expectation is reasonable expectation. So that's what I would say. You seem to say you seem like you have something you want to say about
No, what was the very first few words in there? It says,
you still out here lying about what faith is.
yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, and this was your take on it, right? And these are shorts. Shorts actually sometimes show things in context. Sometimes, a lot of times they don't, right? And you may have to delve into the video to really understand what we're talking about. And a lot of the subjects that we're broaching too, when you and I are talking, really aren't diving deep into subject matter. Sometimes we're just skirting along some subject matter, right?
Oh yeah.
And so
sure.
and so I would, just how do I put it? If you have a question and a statement, go for it, absolutely. But don't say that we're lying about something when in fact we have a definition of faith. And I don't know if I mentioned in this, but the definition of faith biblically is it could be the assurance of things hoped for, the certainty of things not seen, right? Or basically, it has to do with, you look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, atheist or not, and that will be kind of our understanding of what faith is. And then you have to understand the word hope in there. What does hope mean? And then you have to look at what hope is that we have biblically and why we have a hope, which in our minds and our hearts, I will tell you that. And it may be hard for an atheist to believe that. If this is an atheist, are you saying that?
Okay. I mean,
it's an
like,
agnostic. Yeah. Okay, so it's someone that tends not to believe in the Bible, but understand that there is a lot deeper stuff going on there than us just blurting something out biblically, right? It's being sure of what we hope for. What does hope mean? Why are we certain of the hope? Why is hope a certainty and not the hope that we use in the English language? We talked about words meaning things.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. I mean, that to me is a very, it's, if you want to think deeper, it's not a very deep question or the very deep statement, the way that you put it. Think deeper about what we're trying to get at and ask questions in a way that brings about dialogue rather than just saying we're lying about something.
Well, no, I mean, there.
And we appreciate the question. No,
No.
No, I mean, I'm trying not to be.
I do appreciate. We can be sarcastic assholes for sure. No, but No, I do appreciate the comment, and it's not like there isn't value there. There is value there, right? The value is, this is what you do when you're in a debate, right? When you're in a philosophical debate, you have to define your words, right? That's, if you watch the debate between Jordan Peterson and, oh shoot, what's the guy's name? I always forget his name. I was the atheist. There's a great debate between Jordan Peterson and
not Dawkins again.
No, not Dawkins. Yeah, Dawkins.
Hitchens.
Dawkins wouldn't. He actually, Jordan Peterson and Dawkins did do a
was it Hitchens?
Maybe it was Hitchens.
Hitchens is a kind of bigger.
But anyways,
guy. Okay.
He did a series with him, and Jordan Peterson and him spend the first two sessions, which are like 3 hours long, like literally just trying to define each other's words. And they spend so long just digging in so deep. Okay, do you mean this when you say this? Do you mean that when you say that? Like, how is it? Are you talking about this specifically? Are you talking about this specifically? And they start slowly whittling each other's meanings of words down until they get down to something very specific. And then finally, the debate happens, and it's only like
3 minutes long.
The core of it's like 15 minutes long.
Really? Wow,
out of like 4 3-hour videos. There's like 15 minutes in the middle where they're actually debating soming. You know what I mean?
Okay, I don't know if I want to watch that or if I'm just
It's incredible.
Or if I'd rather go to the dentist.
Well, I love that kind of stuff. I got another comment on one of the Nuremberg trial videos. I have two of our shorts up. He says, even though I agree with the statement, let's be honest, the Nazis are terrible, and also the Nuremberg trials were a kangaroo court. When the International Criminal Court wanted to arrest George W. Bush, we said we would invade Switzerland. But that didn't happen, so that's another thing. We love the idea of it, but really might still makes right. Palestine is another war crime. Nothing will be done about war crimes war crimes are only real if you lose, unfortunately.
Can I say something on this?
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to say something because there's a lot of mixture of some, overarching truths. There are things that we do think that might does make right, but it is wrong, right? I don't disagree with that. That it happens and it is unfortunate. You know what I mean? And could the Nuremberg trials be construed as a kangaroo court? Yeah, I don't know. Any from certain angles potentially. I don't disagree with some of the sentiments there, but maybe there are other things pressing that need to be talked about there.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That was from JT.
That was from you, by the way.
But yeah, JT Tint. Yeah. I kind of agree with him. It's not like you're completely wrong. But when you say kangaroo court, you have to understand, like, our entire political system, there are tons of cases that are kangaroo cases, as you'd say. And what they do, though, is these cases set up precedents for future cases, right? That's why we have something called trial law, right? When you go to court, you can cite other court cases as your evidence for why they should rule the way that they should when you go to your court, right? And so the same thing with the Nuremberg trials. And since the Nuremberg trials, once again, are worldly, it's a worldly thing. It's the majority of countries agree with it, right? You can bring that forth in a court of law, right?
But I think the overarching point, though, you were trying to make one point about the Nuremberg, and maybe you can mention that. As you recall, we weren't trying to just talk about the Nuremberg overall, but the point that you were making, I think, is totally valid. Is basically, you tell me you're the government, and then you tell me as an individual who's holding a gun that I need to kill an innocent, and that was really the key, an innocent person. And I do that, and in Nuremberg they said you are guilty, for doing that, right? So that was you weren't talking about Nuremberg overall. You were actually focused on that and saying they determined that in Nuremberg, and I think you and I would say that was probably an accurate determination, whether or not it was a kangaroo court. That little, you can I don't think it was a kangaroo court, but so to speak. But you can argue that point of it was probably, you could argue that's very valid for how they, ruled on that.
Yeah, and that'd be my question there for J Tint is, do you think the determination, like Phil's saying right here, do you think the determination itself was right or wrong? So just let's swipe away everything else and just leave the scenario as it is, right? It's like, if someone has a gun to your back and they tell you to do something evil, are you still guilty of that evil? So that's the question.
Against innocent person. Now, I think that you got to throw that in there because it brings it to a whole different level. When you say
if you're like two warring factions and like both sides have people that are drafted into the war, that would be a different situation. You're saying
it could be. I'm just saying that what you were bringing, like you could say both people are at war, and you have war on both sides, and you have those people fighting the war on both sides. That wasn't what we're talking about. We're talking about a war. The war was happening, right? But you're talking about killing people that had nothing to do with anything, right? Innocent people who were kind of bystanders in the war, in the midst of the land over there.
All right. Well, that's all the comments for there.
Boy, dude, that was I spoke too much because all these had to do with the ones you were speaking on. So
great, very good stuff. It's nice. I like having people. I guess I want to go back and talk to the Philosopher's Folly guy. I'll probably send you a little bit longer of a message to talk to you about. No, actually, you know what? I do want to talk about this in the podcast right here, guys.
Do you want to talk about Revelation or this?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that real quick. Okay. Philosophy and theology. When you do it, and you're presenting a moral conundrum, right? The way that you do philosophy is you boil a scenario down. I just kind of did it with that Nuremberg trial thing. You boil the um the situation, the circumstances down, so that way you're very specific about one thing. And then what you do from that, so you have something that you either are saying is right or wrong, or a way that the world is or something like that. Then you start adding slowly in other things to try to either combat that idea or to draw lines on where that idea is, right? So you sit there and you say, okay, this is wrong. And then you say, well, is there an exception to that? And then you start trying to look for exceptions. You start thinking of exceptions, and then you come up with those exceptions, and then you bring them back, or you start thinking of affirming things that you would say, okay, well, this would make it true too, this would make it true too, and you start stacking up the evidence either on both sides or whatever, and then you can determine, once again, either where this is on the line of right and wrong, or you can determine if it is reality or not reality. I hope that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what you do with theology too. You look, like we were talking about when you're interpreting the Bible, you might have one passage that seems to say one thing, like maybe drinking is wrong, right? Drinking alcohol is wrong, right? But then you start reading through the rest of the Bible, and you start combining more, and you start putting things together, and you determine, the underlying message, and you can determine more from it, right?
I mean, I think it's a little bit different biblically, but I think what you're saying overall is pretty true. You know what I mean? When you're talking about interpreting the Bible, there's several different things, right? They call it hermeneutics, and how do the hermeneutical principles actually work, and how do you go about those principles, right?
Yeah.
What are the things you rely on? We talked about Christocentric. We talked about law and gospel. We talked about having a vague, vague scripture, one that actually is more clear, override the vague scripture. You know what I mean? When you're looking at it and understanding it, you're understanding the verses in their context, right? And meaning a couple things, right? This is probably kind of a rehash of a previous video, so I don't want to belabor too much, but in context, meaning context for the entirety of that verse, right? You take the verse and you look at all the verses kind of around it, and what are they talking about? What's the person talking about? Then it's who was the person talking to, and what time period was it, right?
Yeah.
What were the events that were happening during that time period that give more and greater context to what that person was talking about? So there's several things that those are just examples, but there's several things that go into biblical interpretation or biblical hermeneutics, right? So I've heard, and we talked about this before, I've seen so many scriptures just basically ripped out of their context, and they will use a scripture and they'll use it for a scenario that has nothing to do with it. Or they'll, and I have several examples of those, and a lot of them are actually ones that are ripped out of context by churches. I hate to say it. You know what I mean?
Well, that's. And
so how do you go back and you say, wait a sec, you're taking that verse out of context, and you're creating a doctrine out of this thing that is ripped out of its context. So all that to say is whether you're an agnostic or a Christian, it doesn't, or anywhere along the spectrum, take a look, just make sure that you're looking at it in its full context, and you're honest with that text.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah. That's one of the things that I run into every once in a while, that absolutely drives me nuts is when people take scriptures out of context. Now there's a difference between like a hard scripture where you're trying to figure it out, and then you got another scripture that's pretty much blatantly obvious, But actually, see, you and I argue about that a little bit on the podcast. There's been a couple times where we've argued about specific, scriptures here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't know about the difference between theology and philosophy, and maybe you can correct me here, but But I think you know, when you're talking about how do you interpret the Bible, you have this very specific written word that you're saying, okay, what does this mean? That's one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You have theology over there, which I don't know if anything's written about it. You may have and some other people may have kind of this thought that you're trying to understand it deeper. So it's not really kind of a written word. It's I think it's more, I don't know, I think you guys are dealing more in thought devices and trying to actually figure those things out rather than the Bible where it's a written word and you're saying, hey, you know, what are we looking at here? We're going to talk about that. I think it's kind of interesting because we're going to just brush upon it when it comes to apocalyptic language or revelatory language, or the book of Revelation, so to speak. But, you know, I don't even know if we're going to go into Revelation, but we're going to talk about end times. So apocalyptic just means end times. And then how do you interpret, what does the Bible say about end times? And I think the views in the churches are just, and I didn't realize this until not too long ago, that there are vastly different views. And how do you come to grips with that?
Yeah. This is great. Well, great intro, great segue into the main topic, I guess, of the video here. Now, just to start off, maybe here's something. This is interesting. When we were growing up, you know, the Left Behind series came out, you know, and that might have shaped the way a lot of people looked at, you know, basically Revelations and the apocalypse, you know what I mean? It just, it really, I mean, what was your understanding of it prior to Left Behind coming out? Because you were an adult before then, and you knew about Revelations before then, right? Was there a big shift after that book came out?
I just want to make sure, because you were saying you wanted to go elsewhere rather than apocalyptic stuff, you know, or end time stuff. But are we done with that? Or do you want to start heading down this road? I'm good if you want to head down this road. I have some thoughts on it I can share, you know.
So what different? I mean, I guess I'm kind of combining, Revelations. Apocalypse, and then like I said, I'll probably get into some stuff because I think it's relevant to how the United States is right now, how countries fall. I think all that comes into play. Like as we start talking about Revelations, one things I would say is civilizations rise and fall, and they seem to rise and fall the same way. It seems like a lot of them have a very common thing that happens to them. You know what I mean? A power rises. Rome, you know, you have Rome, you have the Chinese Empire, you have the Han Empire, you have the British Empire, you have the French Empire prior to the French Revolution, then you have the Russian, I'm sorry, not the Russian, but the Soviet Union. All these things. All these civilizations rise and fall the same way.
I'll tell you, here's a thought. It's kind of a segue, but here's a thought. If you want to talk about history and stuff like that, definitely when you bring Callahan on, if you want to head down the historical path, ask him. That kid is absolutely.
He likes that stuff.
Oh man, like I asked him a question. I said, "How did World War I start?" You know what I mean? And then he goes, "Well, it really started here." And he goes, "Well, how far back do you want me to go?" You know what I mean? How did World War II start? And then he basically will tell you.
Yeah.
You know, he'll give you the whole background, and then he'll get into it. So it's interesting. So, but let me talk a little bit about. So I just want to kind of correct you a little bit. It's the book of Revelation. It's the Revelation. It's one. So, you know, so, and I think it's key because it's a holistic revelation that God gave to John on the island of Patmos. Okay.
Yeah. Now a different John than, the John of the Gospels, right?
No. Well, no, he's the one that wrote the book of John, but remember in the book of John, there was John who wrote it and John the Baptist. Those are two different Johns.
No, I understand John the Baptist. That's obviously a different person. But as far as I understand it, the John on the island of Patmos, right, is not the John of
the book of John.
The book of John from John the Gospels.
It's the same one. Same one.
Wait, how do we know that? I'm sorry, not to be. I just. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, anyway, that's a good question. I mean, John, man, where does it come from? That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that right away. Now, John wrote the book of John. He wrote first and second, third John. Then he wrote the Revelation. He wrote those books. Those are the ones he wrote for the New Testament. Now, we know how he introduces himself. I'm trying to think if he introduces himself in Revelation now that you asked that question, but he introduces himself in all the other 4 books, right? In the other 4 books. Does he introduce himself in Revelation? I have to remember if he does.
I know where this question comes from.
Because a lot of times we'll look at a book and it really starts with, how did the person introduce themselves, right? A lot of books and this is kind of the Eastern thought versus the Western thought, I guess. This is part of it, but they introduce themselves at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think. John. He said, John was on Patmos and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Does he introduce himself as the apostle? I don't know 100%, but it is, let's just put it this way, that there's a rare person who says otherwise, that it's not John, right? And so right now I just have no argument otherwise, and I haven't delved into how they determine that.
Yeah, I'll on face value, I'll say yes. I think I know where this question came from. I think I actually watched a like a documentary, YouTube, not a documentary, but like a video where a guy was he's like talking to a class or something like that. He's like giving a lecture, and I think he put forth the idea that the book of Revelations is written so differently than the others that he believes it was a different John.
I don't know.
Something like that. I mean, like I said,
here's what I say. Here's what I say. No. I mean, it's important. It's important to understand, because am I going to go over and am I going to be able to answer your question directly when you ask this? And these conversations that we have, we talked about this, where we're not prepared for these conversations we're going to have. So I didn't prepare the answer to the question.
Yeah.
Now, what I will say is that I lean toward, how do the people in the church look at these things? So the answer to your question about who wrote, John 1, 2, and 3 John and the Revelation, historically that's who it's been, and anyone that actually puts out any doubt against that are going against the historical precedent. So I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Me personally, I haven't spent time on the historical thing. I may need to at one point in time, but right now it's like that's what history has said. So, I'm going to lean on that. We do sometimes. We have faith. We have, because we have 24 hours in each day that we live here on earth, and sometimes we reasonably settle on what we know to be true, unless we hear otherwise, right? Hear good evidence otherwise, and then we might go into it. Does that answer your question, I guess? So, because I don't want someone to say, well, man, he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, well, I may not, but someone else, other people, groups of people already have determined that. Why am I to question it right now? That's really what I'm saying.
This kind of goes back to that comment. I still have them up because I'm still sending them off. But that comment from Philosopher's Volley 4191, you can't live in that state of mind because you never get anything done, right? So as you're talking about some things you're just going to have to just roll with, regardless of how deep you want to get into it, you know what I mean, to figure it out and everything. Like if you spent the whole time trying to figure out, if it was correct or not, if John is the John, if it's the same John, it wouldn't benefit our discussion right here, because we want to talk about what the book's actually about.
Well, so I'm not even really going to go into Revelation when we're talking about apocalyptic stuff, because we're just going to skirt along the outside of it. That's one thing I will say, right?
Okay.
Now I may be contradicting myself because I went to, well, maybe I was in a little bit of a bubble, and so I don't want to contradict myself and say, hey, there are not other things out there. There are other things out there other than what's called the dispensationalist view, right? So, what I remember many years ago on a forum, right? A comment on a forum where someone said, hey, the people left behind, the people that were taken away were taken. No, that's what they said. The people that were taken away weren't raptured; they were taken away to judgment. And I looked at that comment, and from my mindset, right? And from my mindset, I'm like, this guy's crazy. Like, but I didn't know any different.
Did you think about it more?
No, I mean, it didn't. It only, these are things that are just kind of buried in the recesses of your brain until years later when you're starting to look into these things and you're like, wait, this guy may have had a point.
Yeah.
Right? And so
there are spots in the Bible where it says the wise man will run for the hill when they see that the city's falling.
We'll talk a little bit about that because that's an interesting take. So
two will be standing in the field.
One will be left.
Yeah.
And so if you think about the Left Behind series, the whole basis for Left Behind, right, is that you will be left behind to deal with the tribulation. That's the whole basis for that thing. Everyone else, the people that are taken are the people that are raptured, right? Yeah. And so the whole book series that sold more books than probably anything but the Bible are basically their premise is pretty faulty, I would say, and I didn't realize it. So remember, we went to Calvary Chapel, who they're dispensationalists. I went to what's called a Southern Baptist or First Baptist churches, right? And they're very dispensationalist too. So I want to say that to kind of start out to say, I used to think that way, but I never really understood why I thought that way. But listen to the scripture. It's to me, it's tell me otherwise. It's very clear, right?
Okay.
And if you think about it, Matthew 24, I think you start there and you say, what is he talking about? The question was, the disciples said, hey, they were walking, his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple, right? In other words, these massive stones, this massive great temple, this work of art, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus said, you see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. Okay.
Yep.
And then then the disciples start asking questions about this, and they say, what will, let me go back here. I'm sorry. And his disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things be, the temple being destroyed is basically what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Could be 2 questions, could be 3 questions, right?
Yeah.
The temple of your coming and the end of the age. I say the coming and the end of the age are one and the same, but and then he talks about no one will lead you astray. Now, when you start getting into the end of that, or deeper into that chapter, I should say, right? It says, let me see. Immediately after tribulation. Let me see. Where does it go? It's somewhere. Okay. Here's what we're talking about. Now, in between there, we might talk a little bit about that, but I think I want everyone to kind of get this point, right? And this is where I'm saying, I love my dispensationalist brothers, but boy, on this particular thing, I disagree with them quite a bit, right? And it says, and it talks about concerning that day and hour. Now, what day and hour is he talking about? There's nothing here about a rapture. There's nothing. It's just talking about judgment at the end of the age. That's what it's talking about. That's the context of this whole dissertation that Jesus is laying down.
Okay.
No
okay.
one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Or as were in the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man, right?
Oh, for in the days of Noah, because Noah survives, and the rest of the world is wicked, and all the wicked people die.
They will be unaware until they were unaware until the flood came and swept them away. There will be 2 men in the field.
Oh.
One will be taken. One will be left. Right.
Yep.
And 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know when the Lord is coming. But know this: if the master had of the house had known in what part of the night he was coming, he would have stayed awake. He would have stayed awake, right? What did it say? Stayed awake. I'm sorry. Therefore, you must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming an hour when you do not expect. So basically, the people that were taken away to judgment. They were destroyed, and so it's really clear there. And so Left Behind is like, you got a whole bunch of books that have to do with the wrong understanding of who's left behind, which is really interesting. And then, I'm sorry. Do you have any questions? Because I have a lot more to say.
Well, no, I mean, hey,
I mean, like
it's great, because it's totally my sentiments too when I read it, and it's totally how I don't know where I came up. You know what the thing is? Like, I mean, like I said, growing up, I don't think you ever, clarified that or whatever. And I think my general understanding was that the Left Behind series was somehow, at least trying to be valid or something like that. You know what I mean? So I don't think it was really until, oh God, probably like 2016 or something like that, where I read it myself, and I came to the conclusion on my own that that's what it was saying. That it was saying, yeah, it's the wicked that are taken away, right? And the interesting thing is I think God does things the same way that he's always done them. Does it like he did in the flood, right? So the flood comes. It's not this thing where the people disappear like instantly off the ground and their clothes are left behind, like it says in the Left Behind, or like the Left Behind series, has it be. But it's like, it's like a horrific, some sort of horrific act, of world changing, event type situation. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing too, because I've asked, and these are 2 good pastors. Honestly, I asked 2 different pastors going to 2 different churches, help me understand. And I never used this. I don't even know if I knew what the word meant, but I didn't say, hey, help me understand why you believe in dispensationalism. Help me understand about these end times where, how does Matthew jive with First Thessalonians and, and the pieces of Revelation? How do you weave these things in, right? I remember one pastor said, he started answering me, and he said, hey, he goes, the next book, we're almost done with this book. He said, I was thinking of actually starting Revelation here right after this. He goes, why don't you just listen to Revelation? I said, okay. So I listened to it, and I still didn't get it, right? And so, but if we're talking about here, I want to talk about a couple other things. And remember, I'm just sprinkling these things in. There's some really good debates about
real quick, let's can you explain what dispensationalism is?
Dispensationalism?
Dispensationalism.
Dispensationalism, basically, oh man. I'm not really good with definitions. Let me just put it this way. So you have a dispensationalism basically means you have a certain age. You have the age of the church, and then I'm not going to answer that right now because I would fumble. I would fumble it a bit. Okay, so let me hold off and think about that. Okay.
Okay.
But let me just say this: when it comes to taking verses that are a little bit ambiguous or more obscure, right? And finding maybe a verse that talks about the same thing, but is a lot more clear. Which one do you take? You take the more clear one. But I would say,
yeah.
there's two verses when it comes to being taken up. Right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there is one in Thessalonians, right? And it says, since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so God will bring. I'm sorry. It starts out where Paul is trying to comfort the believers who thought that Christ had already come.
Oh,
right?
okay.
He was trying to comfort them, and he says, "We don't want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep. Asleep meaning dead. They're asleep meaning they died, but they died in Christ. That you may not grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord."
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Until
Yeah.
the
That's
Lord,
pretty clear.
and I would argue that there's people that say the coming of the Lord in here infers the rapture of the church. I don't see where there's no place you get that. Not at all.
Yeah, it sounds like when he's going to come back when the new world is formed, and then everybody will be there. Yeah,
it's totally the end of the age. There's no way on planet Earth, if you read it in its context and try not to just throw your view of the rapture of the church in there. You look at it at face value.
Yeah, face value.
You cannot read that.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
For we declare to you by the word from the Lord that we who are alive are left until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven. This is the rapture, right? With a cry. With a command and the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet call of God. Where does it say? I might have cut this out, but with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first, and then we who are alive, who are left, who are on the earth when Christ returns at his final return, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will ever be with the Lord together. In other words, Christ has not come. Don't worry about it. I promise you it will happen. And the people who have fallen asleep are not going to precede those who are still on the earth. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. It's really, it's to me, it's very, very plain as Jane. So let me go into Corinthians, right?
Wait, what was that part though about being taken up into the clouds or whatever?
He says, then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them, with the ones who are fallen asleep in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. Okay. Now, in first, that is Thessalonians. Let me see. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and it's a long chapter, the whole context has to do with the resurrection of the dead. The whole context.
Okay.
It has to do with corruption, incorruptible, immortal bodies, incorruptible bodies. The whole context has to do with that. It has to do with the gospel. He says, the gospel I preach to you, and he tells what the gospel is. If anyone wants to know what the gospel is,
yeah.
That's probably the best.
Did you read that? You read that on a previous episode.
I did. Yeah. Just
go
into 1 Corinthians and chapter 15. And Paul says basically he almost says the gospel is this, or what I preach to you is the gospel, and then he just kind of lays out what the gospel is, right? But in the latter verses, he says, when the perishable puts on imperishable and the mortal puts on immortality, then shall come to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who has given us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. So, and then he says, I don't want you to grieve as those who have no hope, right? For those who have fallen asleep, he talks about that. he talks kind of similar things, right? The archangel will come down, the cry with the cry of command, the voice of an archangel. I'm sorry, no,
Yeah.
I'm convoluting two things. I'm sorry.
But when you're
sorry.
reading those parts though, that's that we talked about that angelistic language, right? Where it's when you talk about like an archangel coming down, like I don't picture that as an actual like human shaped being with wings, floating in the sky coming down. You get what I'm saying? It's like how they describe angels in the Old Testament, you know what I mean? With like, once again we talked about it already. Four heads, 6 legs, 12 wings.
It's a thing that you can't that if you try to draw it just becomes obnoxious.
Yeah, so when it says
I think that's maybe your point,
Yeah.
It's just
well,
like,
I mean, it's not.
It doesn't it
Its
doesn't add meaning
is,
to it.
is deeper than the image that it tries to put forth.
Yeah.
Right. And so when it says an archangel will come down, like this archangel. See, this is how I try to interpret the Bible. Is I believe God works through nature, or God just works through the natural means of the earth and of the physics of the earth and stuff like that. So when an archangel comes down, it's either something like an idea, or it's something like an actual physical thing that happens, or something like that. You get what I'm saying? Like judgment comes down, but it comes down in a way that is, like in a way that the atheist can still deny.
Well, let me.
You get what I'm saying?
That's a whole different thing, because I was not a whole different thing. It's a thing that we could probably talk a little bit about, because I was thinking something similar. Is that actually just recently that God doesn't. The Bible isn't 1 + 1 is 2. It isn't. You know what I mean? Like, well, how come God isn't clear in what he has to say? And it's interesting that Jesus even talks about basically, he spoke parables that people said they didn't understand, like almost like on purpose. If you read it, it's like, well, because they were hard of hearing and they didn't want to understand. You know what I mean? So he spoke parables just to hide it from them, because it's like, what worth was it for the God of the universe to speak to them? And then the disciples would come and they would say, "Can you explain the parables to us?" And he would explain the parables to them, right? And they would go, "Oh, really, I get it." You know what I mean?
We've talked about before. There's some people, that if you present the evidence that you have forth to them, it just doesn't matter. The evidence isn't. That's right. This goes all the way back to this very start of our podcast, and we were talking about this. It doesn't matter what you say to them. It doesn't matter what evidence you bring forth. They'll still deny it. There are people out there, and I'm not saying that's anybody specifically, but I'm just saying in general, there are people that will just still deny it no matter what, right? So we talked about the Pharaoh, right? When Moses has the 13 plagues, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Pharaoh in the movie, this isn't biblical, but in the movie, yeah. Pharaoh denies that the plagues are miracles. He says these things happened on their own. That's what Yul Brynner plays the Pharaoh in the 10 Commandments, and he says, these things happened of their own accord,
So there are a couple things when it comes to that I want to just point out, and these are things these are more just things that I looked at, and I was pondered them, and I still ponder them a little bit, but I would say that it led me to not believe in this dispensationalist point of view, right? Where basically you have, again, dispensationalism, and I'm not trying to explain it because I wouldn't articulate it very well, but basically you have the right now, what age are we living in? Are we living in the church age? Yeah, I believe we're living in the church age. We're living in the age of the church, right? And then the question is, and this is a big question, and I'm not, man, this is a tough one. Who is Israel now, scripture-wise? I'm not even going to answer that right now, okay? because that's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
But what does Paul talk about who true Israel is, right?
Well, the word Israel means. The word Israel means those who wrestle with God. Jordan Peterson, right? He's the one who touts that around. That's what the word Israel mean. He who wrestles with God.
But I want you to ponder this, right? And he says, and he's talking. This is back to Matthew 24, where the question from the disciples. I'm sorry, the disciples said, "Look at the stones," and then Jesus said, "One stone won't be left upon another." And then the disciples said, "Hey, when will this happen, and when will be the sign of the end of the age?" Right? Mm-hmm. And he says, and I'm telling you something. This is Jesus saying, basically. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken about by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, and then it says, "Let the reader understand." Right? That's interesting. Then those who are in Judea, not in everywhere else in the world, right?
That's right.
And remember, I'll get to that in a second. I'm sorry. Those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, right? Let no one on the housetop go down to his own house and take what is left, and don't and not turn back to take his cloak.
Just like Sodom and Gomorrah.
Now, what's interesting about that thing that Jesus pointed out is the common thing, and it was common like it was. What's the most common thing you can think about that we just take for granted here on Earth? Here in the U.S., I don't even know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
but the common thought was Jerusalem is a city that has walls around it. And when the army comes to attack you, you go into the city for protection.
Oh,
right?
yeah, yes.
And Jesus said, "Don't go into the city, don't go into your house, flee to the hills." Now, what happened in now when we're talking about things that have happened, and we're talking about the future event and the 70-year tribulation period and all these other things, I just want people to think about this. This is just one of those little things, and all these things start adding up. What happened in 70 AD is the army surrounded and starved the people out. They starved the people that were within the city walls.
Yeah.
And there's a video, and it's not even a Christian video. It's just like what happened in 70 AD to Jerusalem, and you're like, oh wow, I mean, and there's a great YouTube video on it. There's other ones out there too, I guarantee it. But there's one that it really puts the light and really gives a good synopsis of what happened back then. And remember, back then we had other historians. We're not talking just the authors of the Bible. We're talking other historians who wrote these things down as to what happened. But bottom line is, there were, I think it was just within the walls of the city, if I'm not mistaken, they estimate like 1.1 to 1.5 million people Jews that were killed at that time, who were starved to death, remember?
Yeah.
And anyway, I just want to throw that out there, that Jesus said something totally contradictory to what they always knew to be true.
But it's funny, but that's that's history, right? Is we know that if you look back and you read through all the stories, like the city of Troy, mm-hmm. right? That's what happens to Troy. Troy thinks it's an undefeatable city, mm-hmm. right? And then all of Greece comes, you know what I mean? And it takes some divine intervention from the gods, but basically Troy is defeated and Troy falls and everybody dies that's inside of Troy. And that's what happens. That's what constantly happens. The defender always loses, not always, but the majority of the time the defender loses.
So, and then it says, but now there are some verses that the dispensationalists will say, basically this proves that this had nothing to do with 70 AD, or 70 AD was just kind of a mini prophecy when the overarching prophecy is still to happen, right?
Yeah.
For there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and will never be. Some people latch onto that. I'm not saying I have a perfect answer for it, but if you're talking apocalyptic language, they say there's worse things that happen than that thing that happened in Jerusalem in
like
70
World War
AD.
II or World War One.
Yeah, so
World War One was actually crazy. Like when they developed chemical weapons, It's funny. It's because that was the only time that we really used them in that manner.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the world said, no, you can't use those anymore.
Now,
another Nuremberg-like situation.
Now here's another thing, and you would have to go back into the Old Testament when they talked about very similar, or they had very similar apocalyptic language, because when listen to this, and this I would argue is apocalyptic language even in Matthew, right?
Yeah.
Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the heaven with power and great glory. Right now, this is interesting because if you look in the Old Testament. So in the Left Behind series, they specifically have things like the sun will be darkened as though that event actually happens, right?
Yeah.
The moon will not give his light as though it physically happens. And the stars will fall from the heaven like that will have like a meteorite shower like we've never seen ever before, right? So if you read the Old Testament and see similar language like that, it has nothing to do with earthly events that we see from earth into the heavens, and we go, oh wow, meteor shower. Oh wow, I can't see the sun. Oh wow, I can't see the moon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's nothing like that. And so why do you read Revelation or even Matthew? This is Matthew. This is not even Revelation. Why do you read that and say, and look at the language? We talked about taking the Bible literally, but how do you take it literally? This is one of those you got to be careful, because when you take it literally in the way that that is not apocalyptic, then you do the things like you said, the beast with the eyes on the wings and all these other crazy things, and you're like, I can't even draw that. And when I do, it makes zero sense. It makes worse sense than just reading it. So what do those things mean?
Well, we say all the time, like, when something bad happens in our lives, we say, oh, my life is over. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're like, oh, I'm in such a deep, dark depression or something like that. We use analytic language ourselves in our day-to-day lives when we talk about bad things happening. So you imagine something really bad happening, like your city's under attack. It's gonna look like the sky's darkened out for for a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or it may, and part of it too, it's if you look at it, I would argue that a lot of that is the language, the heavenly language. Yeah. And what does God think of it from a heavenly language? Are we going to see it from earth? I would argue probably not. I would say that we have to understand from God's point of view, what has he said in the Old Testament, and then how does it relate to that same language? Yeah. Now, the other thing I will say is that that's
so great, because I mean, once again, we talked about Sodom and Gomorrah and also the flood as well. These people that were living in the city had no idea what was coming. Right? It says, I think Jesus is the one who says it. The people in Sodom and Gomorrah they were trading. They were selling things just as they were.
They were marrying and giving in marriage, right?
Yeah,
and one everything of them, it talked about in Noah's day.
Yeah. Everything was normal as far as they were concerned. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, bam! Like catastrophic type event. You know what I mean?
Now here's one that is not apocalyptic language. It just says it, right? Okay. I would argue. Just so also when you see these things, right? These things, I talked about, know that the end, that he is near at the very gates. Truly, think about this one when it comes to something that's going to happen way in the future. Truly, I say to you, this generation. Which generation?
The one that they were currently in.
The one that Jesus was speaking to. Yeah. It's hard to argue otherwise. I've heard other people talk about it. Yeah. This generation, and this is where I want to look up dispensation, like the definition, because I do think that this will play a role in this particular verse. This generation will not pass away until all of these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. This generation will not pass away until all the things that he just spoke about have taken place. So why are we saying that Matthew, and some people take Matthew and they say this is, end of times language. I've got to take Matthew in light of Revelation, and everything in Revelation. I would say that most people say chapter 4, verse 1, and they say all of that is future to still happen.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus said that all of these things that I just spoke about, including the shaking of the heavens and the moon darkened and the, you know what I mean? And the sun not giving his light, what is it? The sun darkened, moon not giving his light. I'm sorry. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the stars falling from heaven. Hey, wait a sec. That may have already happened according to Jesus. You know what I mean? Because that generation is long gone, right? So I'm saying that we have to, I'm not saying that I have the answer. I'm saying that I'm thinking of apocalyptic, I'm thinking of end times, right?
Yeah.
A lot differently than I used to. And you asked the question, or not, you said, well, I didn't realize you thought about that. I never really, I guess it was kind of always in the back of my head. I've asked the pastors a question, but I never really had another thing to follow. I didn't even know there was honestly, I didn't know there was another view out there.
Yeah.
And then I started looking, I was like, wow, there's a bunch of churches that absolutely have a totally different view of this, and solid churches. And I was like, I didn't even know they exist. I'm living in this bubble. I didn't even know they existed.
Yeah.
Right? So
here's now. One thing is you were just reading that verse. You still got it real quick.
Yeah. And Matthew.
Now it was saying. Now he's saying these things will happen, but my word will go on forever. Right.
My word will not pass away.
My word will not pass away. What was just before that too? Heaven and earth will fall.
Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Now that's interesting. Just real quick,
because this is that where people argue that he's talking about more than just that generation, but he's talking to all generations or something like that. Is that an argument some people make?
I don't know.
I can kind of just read it that way, as if he's saying this is almost for anybody that reads it.
Well, I see what you're saying. So there are arguments on both sides to be had there. Now, I will say that first he says this generation will not pass away until these things have taken place. Then he says something that isn't really about all the things I said in the past. He just said heaven and earth will pass away. Like, in other words, he's just saying that as factual, right?
Yeah.
I would say that. But my words will not pass away. So I think I get your question. I would say that has that right there is separated from what he said. All of these things will happen.
I can see how you would separate them as well. See, that's why I was saying. I was like, I can kind of see one way, and I can kind of see another. I could also see that other way.
You can look at these, and some of these questions that are posed, I would say on both sides are hard to answer. You know what I mean? Are hard to answer, but I can't look at those verses. They're not vague verses. But the verse in 1 Corinthians 15 and the verse in 1 Thessalonians 4, I think it's 1 Thessalonians 4, where it talks about the taking away, and then you take that and then you go, oh, that's the rapture of the church. It's like, how in the world do you get that? Like, I can't plug it into any place in the Bible.
They're talking very. It almost seems like they only want to quote the field verse where they're saying two people are in the field and one gets taken away. That's like the only one, and they don't quote the ones before and the ones after and all the other. You know what I mean? We were talking about people taking one verse out of context, and it kind of seems like that's the one. I think when it comes to that viewpoint.
It's probably when I talked about other verses that I think are taken out of context, some of the ones that are taken most out of context, I never even referenced those that I think are taken out of context. Those might be the ones that you could argue are probably taken more out of context, than any other verse, because it has to do with it's clear spam risk.
Yeah.
But it's to me, it's very clear. It has to do with when Jesus returns and what's going to happen, right? That don't worry, don't worry. Jesus hasn't returned yet. It's basically the new, the brand new church that basically didn't have the full. They had the Old Testament, but they didn't have all the writings in the New. And basically, Paul's trying to comfort. He even said, comfort one another with those words. Christ hasn't come yet. And you don't have to worry about that. He's not saying Christ hasn't raptured the church yet. Christ hasn't come yet. That's the whole message.
Yeah.
When is Christ coming for his people? It's twofold. It's the people that have fallen asleep, that you've passed away. Remember I said, and I quoted it wrong, I said, but precious in the sight of the Lord are the death of his saints. They've died in Christ.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be the end of the age where they haven't died, and he's just going to, and the whole world is going to be, effectively, the corrupt world is going to be destroyed, and the new heaven and the new earth are going to replace it.
It's crazy.
I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great.
Lot,
you're doing great. But it's crazy. The more we talk, the more this podcast has gone on. There are certain words and certain verses that you're using, and I'm starting to see them in another light. Like I'm starting to see just a little bit of a deeper way of looking at some of them. You know what I mean? Like you just said, the saints dying, right? What's the quote again? Or what's the Bible verse again? How does it go?
Those who are alive, that one?
No. The blessed are the saints when they die.
Yeah, precious. I'm sorry.
Precious.
I did say blessed last time,
Okay.
but I think they're not. But I like precious. Precious in the sight of the Lord are the death of his saints.
The death of his saints.
Yeah, we were using.
Death might not be a physical thing. Could death possibly mean? Because the other quote from Paul, or was it Paul or was it Timothy? Whatever. When
Paul to Timothy, Paul to Corinthians.
Yeah, when that sin entered, and then he died, and then he was a slave to the Lord, or something like that, right? Is how does that one go?
You're talking. Okay.
These are all things we've talked about on the podcast. Yeah. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Sin entered. You're talking about when sin entered, and then I died. Is that the one?
Died. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sin
entered. I'm sorry. He's talking about the law. The law,
Yes.
The law, if that's what you're talking about. I didn't read that one today, but
not today, but yes.
The law came about. What does he say? And the law being a mirror. I think we're back to that. Maybe is that what you're? Okay.
Yes.
Trying to think of that verse, but basically the law, when the law came about, I sinned and then I died.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, can you kind of see how like all these things are like connected? How there's like threads that like connect them to each other. That's what I'm starting to see. I'm starting to see just these little threads where you can kind of take them in different contexts and they have deeper meanings other than just face value meaning. You get what I'm saying? I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I don't know, maybe it's not.
I think
based on your reaction. No,
I mean my mind weaves a lot of verses together sometimes, right? Now I will tell you that tell anyone out there that if your mind works the same, I try to be, at least I think I try to be careful trying to weave verses in and saying, hey, this one has to do with this one. In fact, the context is totally different, has nothing to do with it. Because it can be easy. Like it's like putting a puzzle together and you're forcing a piece in there because it's round at this end. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, that must fit. No, it's a different size round one, right? And so yes, I agree with you. Yes, you have to be careful when you're weaving verses together.
Yeah, I guess I could have worded that better.
No. Yeah. I get it. What I will say though is that it does talk about death in a couple different ways, and sometimes it's very clear. It's talking about spiritual death. It's talking about physical death. It talks about being spiritually dead when you're physically alive. It talks about your the fact that when you sin, you're spiritually dead, and at the end of the age, we are going to die. We're all going to die. here, die meaning our bodies physically is going to shut down because of our spiritual state, which is spiritual death. So how do you bring those together and make sure that you're keeping them, the categories where they need to be, and you're weaving them together properly, but you're not taking one over the other when in fact one doesn't have to do with the other. Does that make sense?
Good stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry. Can I say, do you have any more questions? Because I do have one more verse.
I don't know if I have any more questions.
Yeah.
I think what I want to talk about now, though, is why don't you do your one verse, but then I want to move on to actually talking about our current day and age and our current situation. You know what I mean? Because it's so funny. And we'll give your verse.
Let me just say this. I think there is a so-called prophet out there, Christian. And I'm putting Christian in big old quotes here, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean by that, right? That has said, I think the rapture of the church is gone. I think it's just a few days away. I think it's when I'm on vacation next week.
That's all.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what I talk about.
But let me just tell you, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know that. Let's be confident it's not going to happen. I'm 100% sure of that. I'm more confident that that's not going to happen than whether I'm going to be alive in a week or two.
Yeah.
But anyway.
No, well, yeah, that was one of the things I was going to say. It's always a popular topic. There's always people that are saying the end is coming. Like, what was it? The Watchtower, or what are they called? The
Jehovah's Witnesses Watchtower, same thing.
Where, they believed that it was going to end. Well, at first they believed it was like 1998, then they believed it was going to end in like 2005 or something like that. Some stupid stuff.
So that whole thing. So Charles Hayes Russell, back in the time, he basically, the Watchtower was formed in New York, right, by Charles Hayes Russell.
Yep.
And he basically thought it was kind of one of those things where he thought he had revelation better than anyone else, and that's a really dangerous thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's like he might have been at the beginning of both wars. I can't remember, 1914, 1917. There's other dates in there. It might have been like 1981. And then finally they said, Christ has come, but he came spiritually. You know what I mean? So so they've said that. The Hale-Bopp comet guys, I can't remember the name of those. And because of that cult, right?
Yeah.
So because of the Watchtower, there was a time, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, where I don't know if they were told, but many of these people lost their finances because they sold their goods or gave their goods away because they knew Christ was coming. Think about that.
Yeah.
The Hale-Bopp comet guys, this is real. I mean, we joke around about that, but this stuff is life and death. Those guys have lost their livelihood. The Hale-Bopp comet guys actually all died. That whole small cult died. You talk about Jim Jones. And not only did he use the word Jesus or Christ or whatever, he ended up saying he was the Christ, right? And so they drank themselves the Kool-Aid of death, right? So did who?
Well, I don't know if Charles Manson claimed to be. Yeah, he claimed to be Jesus. Yeah, Charles Manson claimed to be Jesus.
So it's interesting because when you're talking about anything when it comes to theology, you got to get your basis right, because people have followed who have said things aberrant, or basically people who are leaders of cults who basically have led people to lose their livelihood or drink the poison of death.
Yep.
So that is extremely, like, we joke around about it in an overarching manner, and we do because we are sarcastic at heart. I am. You said you are at the beginning of this, but it is when it comes down to it, it is serious. It is very serious because it has to do with.
Well, the difference between your generation and my generation is your generation had these mini cults, right? Mm-hmm. But these mini cults were obvious that they were wrong, right? Because it's like from the outside looking in, like the stuff they're doing is crazy, right? Now what we have giant cults that are so big because they're subtle. They've learned how the cults have learned how to become subtle, and now they inhabit a large group of the population that don't even realize they're inside of a cult because they're captured by their ideological views. You know what I'm saying?
I'll tell you what.
That they didn't. The cults from your generation did not go away. They have just gotten bigger and smarter.
It was. Oh my gosh! I think there's a lot of truth there. I do. I think that a lot of I don't know what this says about anything, but in the in the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s, it was I thought it was very apparent. The cults were very apparent.
Yeah.
A lot of the cults right now are in so-called Christian churches, and maybe that's what you're alluding to. I don't know. That's what I see. There's some others out there, but there are churches right now who are either very aberrant, or I would argue they're a cult in a different way. They are all about, what do we do here now on earth to gain God's favor?
Yeah.
What are the things that we need to give God in order to gain the favor? And a lot of times the giving to God is all of this stuff that we have to do. A lot of it is finances, right? I have to give in order to get God's favor, in order for me to live healthy, wealthy on earth, in order for my spouse who has cancer to be cured. I mean, this is some evil stuff going on.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And what they end up doing, guess who? It's obvious. Guess who is gaining from this theology? Kenneth Copeland is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let me just say his name.
Yeah.
Creflo Dollar is.
Yeah.
Jesse Duplantis is.
Once again,
it's not the people within the church. It's those leaders who absolutely are heretical, and I would argue are cultish or cults themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that your point is that these are more. These other people in the time past, they used to really, you had the church, and then you had the people outside the church, and the people in the church, maybe they were more aberrant if they were, a little bit, they didn't do or say things that were theologically correct. Maybe that's what you're saying. But I think more now, it's those people that are saying they're part of the church.
Yeah,
and it's harder. It's harder to distinguish sometimes. You got anyway, and then YouTube.
It makes you wonder if the like during the Spanish Inquisition, it's almost like the offending units, the people that actually killed people. You know what I mean? It's almost like they had something right there. You know what I mean? It's scary to say. You don't want to really say that. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to go around crucifying people. Obviously, you know what I mean. Which is because that's what the they did to Jesus, and obviously in past times as well. You know what I mean? They basically go to try to kill the true believers and everything like that. But there is something. Callahan brought it up. There's a Bible verse that says, if your neighbor tries to make you worship another god, kill him or something like that, right? That's an Old Testament verse, right?
Yeah, I can't remember the one he quoted, but yeah, he was quoting an Old Testament verse that kind of was saying the same thing. Now remember, this was in the walls of Israel, and God was very. It's not that he's not serious now. That's not the point. But when he instituted things in the Old Testament in terms of the law and the way that he was trying to protect his people, right? Protect his people from being corrupt, right?
Yeah. Then
basically you're not going to have people that do it they know that basically they might lose their life if they say something stupid like that, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that they did, they're going to squash them, but you're going to have a lot less people that even purport these lies in the first place because they know what may come of them.
Yeah. Right? See, this goes back to what I'm saying about how. So my viewpoint is that civilizations rise and they fall, and we go back to talking about the Soviet Union. It's the same way. Mm-hmm. People basically would tell on their neighbors, right, in order to make themselves look better, but then someone would just tell on them, and so it created a feedback loop. Basically, it's like people just constantly telling on each other, You know what I mean? Just out of fear, and then each person being taken out basically behind the shed.
There's so much to say in the in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament about what is one of the commandments, you know what I mean? That you aren't going to say something falsely about your neighbor.
Yeah, don't falsely
you falsely accuse your neighbor, God takes that. Like that is not one of these. That's not commandment number 512.
Yeah,
that's in the top 10. No, I'm just,
for sure.
And then in the Old Testament, it talks about shedding innocent blood. There's all sorts of things. But back to this Revelation thing. I'm sorry, I just want to say just a couple things about it. But one is the view that Revelation 4 is all future, and I'm just gonna kind of put this out there, and people take it take it as they will, I should say. So after this, now after this is when Jesus is talking to John about the churches, right? The church in Sardis, the church in Laodicea, right?
Yeah, he goes through all of them.
So he talks to the churches, and then it says, after this, I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Right?
Yeah.
So they look at that, and they say, and also in that verse, they say that's the last verse that the churches are mentioned until like chapter 19, I think is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have this people that verse, because John is taken to heaven, they equate that to the rapture of the church, and those two verses, those are I think those are the only two verses, Thessalonians and Corinthians, that talk about anything that could be even construed as the rapture, and they combine it with this, and they say, See, I told you, John is taken up to heaven, and that is similar to the rapture of the church. And then you have all these chapters that have nothing to do with the church. It just has to do with with what's coming onto the world during the 7-year tribulation period.
Yeah,
it's speaking from silence, I guess. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where they hoist their view upon the text rather than saying, what does the text actually say? Well, It doesn't say that, but then they believe in a rapture of the church, so of course it means that.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm just saying, be careful.
Yeah.
Of
we'll
that.
See. So this is what happens when civilizations fall. You think about like the Dark Ages, right? So like after Rome falls, right, you have basically this period of time where, I mean, just things are just as awful as they could possibly be, right? Because there's no money, there's no trade, there's no protection anymore. Like the civilization has fallen, and now you have just several years of where basically technology comes to not only a dead standstill, it actually goes back. Because the Romans had great things. The Romans had like roads that were like way better than our current roads today, right? They had like
sewage systems.
Huh?
Sewage systems.
Yeah,
Seriously,
they had aqueducts, and they had
aqueducts,
and yes, sewer systems and things like that. They had all sorts of crazy. I actually watched a YouTube video where basically, once again, another person that was like talking in front of a class. He was arguing that the Romans were actually probably pretty close to steam technology, and we didn't get back to steam technology until we're in America, a lot longer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's really interesting. It took time for civilization to build up after the fall of something like that. And you have to realize, Rome was pretty big. It was the entire known world at the time. But now think of our world now, you know what I mean? And the way that the United States and the Chinese government, how we basically control the majority of the world. If one of us falls, you know what I mean? What happens? Like, you have another dark age where people go back down into this, you lose technology. You go back in time, things get really hard. And it's funny. It's like, that's when people are forced to survive, when we're no longer living in cushy lives, that's when people get really smart, you know what I mean? It's because they're forced to be smart. You're forced to be smart because you have to survive. You get what I'm saying?
We talked. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you and I agree there. You're forced.
We get dumb in our comfort because we're not like Pain is a motivator. Isn't that part of the problem with Pain by C.S. Lewis? Is he talks about
that one I haven't read.
That one you haven't read. I've read that one as well. I'm pretty sure the argument is that pain is a motivator to push you forward. You know what I mean? And if you don't have it, you wouldn't do anything.
Yeah,
you just lay around.
You and I agree that hard time that when you're in certain circumstances, you become more resourceful, you become more motivated, you become more intelligent as a result, right?
Yeah.
Now it's different than saying we're sitting in front of the mic, we're watching TV, we're getting smart. I'm saying not we. I'm just saying that people in this day and age may think they're intelligent because they know more.
Yeah.
But it's totally different than someone who is resourceful and have figured things out the hard way and have learned to live and adapt because they've lived, because they've had to figure out how to get food on the table or whatever the case may be, or shelter, or whatever the case may be, because it wasn't something that they could just go out there and buy a house or rent a house or find a trailer.
Go to Walmart and buy food.
Yeah, exactly. I think the point is, for me, is that we look at that and we say, we would look at the two when we go out. These guys over here that are sitting at their desk a lot smarter than that person out there who's struggled and has figured things out.
Yeah.
I think we have got that upside down sometimes.
Yeah,
that's all
absolutely,
I'm saying.
absolutely. Well, I mean, you just I don't think people realize what would really happen if the internet were to actually go down, the whole the whole of the internet. Everything.
I don't even know how I would get water right now.
Yeah,
I have a well.
That's
for electricity.
That's if electricity went down. Yeah, if electricity went down, yeah.
But
luckily, I have 2 springs on my property.
Mine are 500 something feet deep.
You can come over to my house.
I might have to.
No.
Wait a sec. What if I didn't have gas? No.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, that's that's the thing. As soon as the internet goes down, so many people all their money is on cards. There's a lot of people don't use cash nowadays, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I still use cash occasionally and everything like that, but it's all on your card. As soon as the internet actually goes down, as soon as you have the entire crash of the system, you no longer have any money. All your money that was on that card, it's gone. It's not coming back. You know what I mean? And so how are you going to get anything? You got to, unless you have, and then the question is, are people going to even accept cash? If the United States government falls and you bring in some paper money, it's not worth anything anymore. You know what I mean? You bring $20 down to the gas station. The gas attendant, is he going to give you gas off the $20 that says United States of America, and there is no United States? You get what I'm saying? It's this compounding thing, and it could happen so quick. People don't realize how fragile our system really is that we've built. We've built it all up, and we've tried to make it robust. We've tried to do certain things to ensure longevity, but the ultimate truth is, you know what I mean, if it goes down, you know what I mean, people are screwed. People are not going to have a good time. It would be absolute chaos. I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't want to live in a big city, right? The big city is going to be the hardest place, because that's the place where everybody's going to be quickly trying to get a hold of some survivability, before they start spreading out of the town. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Run for the hills, everybody. No, I'm joking. No.
You're speaking prophetically. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it's always a popular topic. Everybody always wants to say, that it's coming, the end of the world, the end of our civilization and everything. But man, there are some warning signs, man. Charlie Kirk's death, I think, was one of them. That's a pretty big warning, because for a long time, I mean, the right has always known that the left is violent. You know what I mean? And for a long time we were kind of dismissive of it, though. It's like usually when they're violent, they attack their own anyways, usually it's in big cities. Usually it's, it's I don't know. It's weird. Someone was talking about it. It really does feel like that was a line that was crossed. The Charlie Kirk death. It was it was a line that was there before. It's like you hadn't quite crossed it. It's one thing to assassinate a president, right? Because a president has power. A president has political power over the entire country, over people, over you, and everything like that. And although, it's incredibly horrific, it has happened in the past. And in some way, it can kind of make sense. You know what I mean? But Charlie Kirk's death is, this dude's basically innocent, man. Like, he's as innocent as it gets. He has no power. He has no ability to change anything about your life at all. You know what I mean?
You can choose to believe him or not, right?
Yeah. I mean, and all he's doing is freely speaking in front of people. He's not, he's not forcing his beliefs on anybody. He's not forcing anybody to listen to him. Like, if you didn't want to show up, don't show up. You know what I mean? And then guess what? He loses all his all his perceived power that you have of him. You perceive that he has power of some sorts because people gather around him. But you're the protesters as well. You're gathering around him. You're feeding his power. You know what I mean? The best way, if you want to shut somebody down, is just ignore them. Just walk away. Just ignore them, man.
Apparently, not enough people could.
Yeah.
Let me. So I'm gonna go away from that, and I'm gonna come back. I want to come back to this Charlie Kirk thing. Okay, I really do.
Yeah.
But this is a good definition of dispensationalism. Back to that question you asked me, right?
Oh yeah.
And I'm better at reading it. I apologize, but it's a Christian system of biblical interpretation that divides history into distinct eras called dispensations, each marked by God's specific administration or economy of rule, right? So understanding Scripture, it's characterized by a literal, it says a literal, we could argue that, understanding of Scripture, particularly prophecy. That's really what dispensation, it's all about prophecy. A strict distinction between God's plan for the nation Israel and the church, right?
Yeah.
And belief in a future earthly kingdom for Israel, followed by a pre-tribulation rapture, right? Now, and then it goes into, this is a good one. A key principle is it talks about dispensations, literal interpretation, Israel and the church, end times eschatology, God's future promises to Israel. So this is really, I'm trying to tread lightly because when Paul talks, I'm just going to say this because I think it's important for people out there who read the Bible and believe in the Bible, read what Paul talks about who Israel is, and then try to, and then like read it, study it, and then try to step back and look at it as though God has a distinct plan for the country of Israel. What that is, there a plan, and what, if so, what is the plan? And is God having two parallel paths where it's the church and Israel, or is Israel and the church one? That's the question, right? Take a look at what the Bible says, then, and be honest with yourself about what that is. So I'm just going to leave it at that because it's a hot topic, and it's as though people that believe that are anti-Israel. That is not it at all, right? But you have to ask the question. When Jesus was, there are verses after verses after verses of how harsh and the judgment coming on Israel and how harsh he was to the nation. And then they ended up, meaning everyone did, everyone's liable, but Jesus was a Jew. They killed his own.
Yeah.
So, and Jesus had parables about this. He talked about this, and they ended up killing his own, who God sent to the world to save the world, and they ended up killing him. Don't pretend that God doesn't judge people for stuff like that.
Yeah.
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 So I'm just going to leave it at that. Now, when it comes to Charlie Kirk, I am watching the Mike Winger. Now, Mike Winger, I think, is a dispensationalist, and I'm not saying that I'm throwing him out. Mike Winger is absolutely a Christian, and I love listening to a lot of what he has to say. Do I believe in everything everyone has to say out there? Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I really like the way that Mike Winger thinks. Now he has this thing. I haven't watched the whole thing, but it is about Charlie Kirk. The good thing about Mike Winger is he doesn't put this out the same day, the day after, an hour after, whatever the case may be. He puts it out days later after he's thought about it. Now, same thing with us is that we talked a little bit about it in the previous ones before the assassination of Kirk, and we admitted we didn't really watch or listen to the guy, right? But we had questions about certain things. He said the same thing, but then after his death is only when he really started researching who Kirk was, right?
Yeah.
He said he says he has to say that he was a martyr for Christ. Everything
there's some videos where
wow.
Charlie Kirk he's literally I talked about this on the last podcast. There's a video where Charlie Kirk is talking in front of basically a guy wearing a Satan t-shirt, and he is just straight up preaching Jesus. Like he's just like, Jesus was Christ, he was God, and he just goes through the whole thing. He puts it in like the picture perfect like Christian outline. It's just it's as good as it can get.
That's awesome.
I like you can't find a better version of just like what Christianity like how to convert somebody. Like that was incredible. It was like absolutely amazing.
Now why do I bring that up? It has to do with your statement just a few minutes ago about kind of like what people are thinking now. How the world is right now, because we look at the world. I think the world is a lot smaller than it was, a century ago, a lot smaller, so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
And so we can see things 2 seconds after something happens on the other side of the world. You know what I mean?
Literally. Literally.
Yeah. And so we see things a lot quicker than we used to in the past. And then the world has become a lot smaller. And you were kind of alluding to I guess the fact that, that there was a lot of people. How do we look at the world? How do we look at the world now? How do we look at apocalyptic, language? How do we look at end times right now when it comes to stuff like this? I don't know how. I guess I don't have the answer for you. I don't think you were asking a question, but my comment is that, and I bring back Charlie Kirk into this as an example, is that. And it was interesting that in that video that I haven't watched the whole thing, but where he basically says he is a martyr. John the Baptist was a martyr in the same way Charlie Kirk was. Now, how does he say that? It's because he was killed for his Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
But he was also killed for what he said of the evils of these people that were in government too.
Yeah.
John the Baptist wasn't killed for saying the kingdom of God has come near, or look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, right?
Yeah.
He was killed because, was it Herod? I think it was Herod. Because he was telling Herod, you're taking your brother's wife, and you can't do that. Yeah. That's what he was killed for. Yeah. And Charlie Kirk was killed in similar fashion, and there's a part that's even deeper to it too, though. Is like these were bad people, and that might have been the excuse they used. But even on the inside, remember, there's more to that story. You know what I mean? Yeah. About his wife and his wife's daughter. So these people are evil to the core. What I mean? They'll look for any excuse. That's one of the. I don't know if it's one of the few, but I think I would argue that most of the time when you look in the Bible, you see evil that's happening. It's the men. That's one of the few times where the women were the ones that coerced a leader to behead John the Baptist. Oh, yeah. Look at that. And it's purely diabolical.
Yeah.
And he did not want to do it. Read it. He did not want to do that. He was disturbed because he said, "I'll give you half the kingdom.
Yeah.
You dance for me, and I'll give you whatever you want, up to half the kingdom." And they said, "We don't want half the kingdom. We just want his head on a platter."
Jesus.
And he said, and you could just look at that and just him sinking his head or whatever. And at that time, when a man's word was, he stood by his word. When he said something, he meant it. and he had to go about doing that.
So
anyway, that's a whole.
Yeah.
Read the Bible. If you're an unbeliever, the stories in it are crazy, are absolutely insane when you look at it. So don't dismiss it and say even the stories within are just, like Dawkins said, you know what I mean? I'm guessing that Dawkins didn't read. He just didn't read literature, because the stuff in there it's nuts. Look what David. I mean, David. Some of the things that he did.
Yeah,
we talk about him, a man after
anti-hero. You said,
but man after God's own heart. Yet there were some things he did, which is like he killed several people. But there was one point in time where I think it was him and another leader of a different. Can't remember what it was, a different nation. I can't remember. They basically were just sending their guys out to see who was stronger, and they let them fight to the death to see who has better soldiers.
Yeah.
That's evil. That's that was, trust me, that was in the history books. But don't mistake the fact that it was written about that God sanctioned it.
Yeah.
Two different things.
Yeah. So I guess we should finish off here. I mean, I just want to say one last thing. As all things basically on this earth, they start off small, they grow, they become big, then they get old, they get weak, and then they fall. And I think that's literally everything that could possibly exist within this universe is going to go through that stage of life and death.
You're bringing it back to nations, right? That was
so now I'm thinking about nations. I'm thinking about ideas too, ideals and things like that. Now, some things live a lot longer. Humans live a lot longer than dogs. You know what I mean? But eventually, we die too. Just like that tree out there, that tree is gonna, it's gonna wither and die and fall over. But then, once it's gone, something else is gonna pop up and replace it. So that's how I view the world. And as you're looking at the United States right now, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe the United States is starting to get old. Maybe it's how long is it going to last? I don't know. You know what I mean? And maybe it can do things to give itself a shot in the arm and keep itself living longer. I mean, we've increased our livelihood by modern medicine, so maybe we can increase the United States livelihood. But eventually, the countries will fall. And especially when you have a one world economy like we have now, that too eventually will fall. And so when something falls, it's gonna feel like the apocalypse for sure, man. It's gonna feel, there's gonna be people that are, and that's what's gonna happen is people are gonna go crazy, man. People, when stuff like that happens, people are gonna go crazy, and they're gonna cling to what they can in order to try to survive, but try to cheat to survive. You get what I'm saying? And
are you saying, so in situations like that, you're gonna see the worst and the best of people?
Yeah,
and potentially the worst.
Well, you're probably going to see the worst, and then the smart people are going to head for the hills. So there we go. We'll finish with that. So hey, thanks guys for watching. If you're still watching, give us a like, subscribe on YouTube or on Spotify. We'd appreciate that. We love comments. We'll continue to read off the comments. I respond to them too. I type out a little response, and I hope you guys come back and you guys listen to us. And like I said, we can be a little bit sarcastic and we can be a little mean, but you know what I mean.
But bear with us. Be sarcastic back if you want. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the comments, and so if you want to continue to have, if somebody made a comment and they want to continue to have a discussion, comment again, you know what I mean, and we'll respond again, and we'll see, see if that happens. So, anyways, thanks guys very much. All right,
I felt I talked a lot, so we'll let it go at that.
No, you did good today. All right, thanks guys. Bye. Not too bad.
That long one.
It's an hour and 50.
I don't know. I mean, what do you think about it? I always like look.